Welcome to another segment of Pearced Off with Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Today I'm going to talk to you about the shrinking explanatory power and scope of God, and how over the centuries he or she or it has been pushed back further and further until basically he seems to provide nothing of any use for any of us. I'm going to use a couple of quotes from a few books, one I've just edited by James A. Lindsay, which is called ... Infinity plus God equals Folly, and it's a book about infinity and God and how they don't really work together. So this quote goes, "When God was conceived, at least in the Abrahamic traditions, he lived on a mountaintop. When people climbed the mountain, God wasn't there to be met, and when they descended the other side to meet new people, they were forced to place God in the sky, and they had to make God big enough for both peoples. We've been to the sky. In fact, we've been above it. God isn't there either. He did not meet us in low Earth orbit. He did not meet us when we walked upon the moon, and our robots have not found him on any other planet in our solar system, or now just outside it. Our telescopes cannot see him, even as they peer out into the apparently edgeless universe, and so people have moved God beyond the universe to an imaginary realm, and as God went, they've had to make him big enough to account for it all. Part of all that all is not only every conception of God that humans have entertained and worshipped, but also every potential conception of God that is conceivable. Monotheism demands it. In lieu of an actual physical God of this world, the potential conceptions of God are infinite, and so God too must be infinite to usurp them all. But as we've seen, God cannot be infinite unless believers would also accept that he must also be abstract. This is mental stuff. Though apologists may defend this idea of God, a majority of believers do not accept an unreal philosophical deity of this kind. Theirs is a living, breathing, acting agent that will one day judge the living and the dead, a fact easy to lose sight of when talking with apologists." So that was James A. Lindsay talking about God with regard to infinity, but kind of shows how God has been pushed back further and further as we have advanced our scientific knowledge of the world and the universe around us. God physically is pushed back to what can only be a sort of conceptual, abstract realm, and somehow can still causally interact with this physical universe. Now, John Loftus talks about similar ideas in his book The Outsider Test for Faith, together with the cognitive biases concerning and dealing with the ever-retreating God. So this is a quote from John Loftus. "The best and only way to avoid cognitive bias is to actively seek out disconfirming evidence, which is what the OTF, the Outsider Test for Faith, encourages believers to do as informed skeptics. In 1971, a NASA space orbiter named Mariner 9 discovered that the canals on Mars were illusory. This discovery strongly disconfirmed the claim that there was intelligent life on that planet. Before this discovery, many people claimed they encountered Martians. Afterwards, Martians stopped visiting us, and we instead started receiving visitors from Venus. Then, after the surface of Venus was found to be hot enough to melt lead, Venusians stopped visiting us too. Now visitors from space came from far more distant places in our universe. What explains this? It's because there were never any Martians or Venusians who visited Earth. When we examine the messages from UFOs, we see that they have always been addressed to the fashions of a particular time period. None of them conveyed any new scientific information, even though visitors from other planets should be far more advanced than us. Before the Cold War was over, the messages warned of nuclear war. Then later they warned us of the degradation of our environment. UFOs didn't warn us about ozone depletion in the 1950s or about the HIV virus in the 1970s, when it might really have done some good. Can it be that aliens know only as much as those who report their presence?" So this quote talks about how sort of miracle claims at their basis are nothing more than spurious, and we can apply such to the claims of Jesus for sure. Why didn't the all-loving God incarnate as man tell us something about how malaria is spread, how we should boil surgical utensils before using all these different ideas that Jesus could have come up with? He didn't seem to know anything more than a simple itinerant preacher of his time, and God seems rather unwilling to give knowledgeable advice in visions and through prayer. Loftus continues, "Now apply the same critical thinking to the Bible and its God. You don't believe Martians or Venusians visited Earth. Why? Because we discovered some facts about these planets. Yes, I know we've discovered water on Mars. You also don't believe they visited us because the messages these aliens supposedly communicated were not the kind we would expect, offering us nothing new and changing with the fashions of the times. That's why you shouldn't believe in the God of the Bible. First, when we discovered that the gods didn't live in the mountains, believers then proposed that they lived in the sky. As we gradually discovered how huge the sky was, the God of faith got bigger too, until believers claimed he lived in an entirely different realm. So you can see here the two quotes from Lindsay and from John Loftus are very closely connected here. So God seems to have been squeezed to the last, most untouchable place. God appears to be nothing more than an abstraction, invisible to science, invisible to humanity. So that's something to think about, the ever-decreasing sphere of influence that God has. I've been Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Please visit my blog, and as ever, question everything.